The sun burned mercilessly over Jerusalem that fateful afternoon. Golgotha, the hill of the crucifixion, was filled with a restless crowd. Roman soldiers, Pharisees, onlookers, and followers of Jesus, all witnessing the most decisive moment in history. But while human eyes saw only a man hanging on the cross, something invisible was taking place in the heavens. Accounts preserved by Ethiopian tradition speak of a hidden presence at the scene. Archangels Michael and Uriel hovered over Calvary, fulfilling a divine mission. Michael, the celestial warrior, observed in silence, while Uriel, the bearer of God's light, held something that had never been mentioned in the Western Gospels, a chalice of pure celestial light, ready to receive the sacred blood that would soon be shed. The very sky seemed to weigh upon the holy city, the clouds gathering like a divine omen. Among mortals there was a strange silence, as if something far greater than the death of a man was about to happen. The fate of the world was being decided at that very moment, but the true extent of what was occurring would only be understood by a few. What was unfolding there was not merely an execution, it was a cosmic event. Minutes passed like an eternity. The body of Jesus, already exhausted and wounded, hung on the cross while the Roman soldiers inspected his condition. Ethiopian tradition asserts that when the centurion Longinus, the man in charge of ensuring the death of the condemned, raised his spear and pierced the side of Christ, something extraordinary occurred. The blood and water that gushed forth did not merely touch the ground. They were also drawn into Uriel's chalice, as if an invisible force were collecting them. To human eyes, it appeared as just another brutal act in an execution. But on the spiritual plane, that act triggered a reaction that surpassed earthly understanding. The chalice of light, upon being filled with the blood of the Messiah, shone with an intensity that no mortal being could bear to see. Uriel himself, forged in divine flames, bowed slightly, feeling the weight of what he held. In response, Michael raised his sword, and at the very moment the sacred blood touched the bottom of the chalice, the sky split open with a celestial tear. The connection between the physical world and the divine realm strengthened, and an event never before recorded on earth began. In the instant that the sacred blood filled the chalice, a supernatural wind swept across Golgotha, chilling even the hardest of soldiers. The sun, which had shone brightly before, was obscured by dense dark clouds, casting a sinister shadow over the holy city. The onlookers looked around, confused, as a murmur of fear spread among the crowd. It was as if something beyond human comprehension was taking place. And it was. On the invisible plane, Michael and Uriel knew there was no time to lose. The lamb's blood could not remain there, exposed to the mortal world. It had a purpose, beyond human understanding, a destiny predestined by the heavens even before the creation of the world. With a resolute look, Michael wrapped Uriel in his resplendent wings, and, in a sudden movement, they disappeared into the midst of the celestial tear. Men's eyes could never perceive their departure, but the impact was felt instantly. The ground trembled violently, cracking beneath the soldiers' feet. The veil of the temple was torn from top to bottom, signaling that something irrevocable had happened. The priests, horrified, fell to their knees, not fully understanding that this was a day that would forever change the history of humanity. As the earth still trembled, a spectral silence took over Golgotha. The Roman soldiers exchanged glances, suspicious, gripping their spears even tighter. Even the Pharisees, who moments before had mocked Jesus, seemed uneasy. In the temple, the priests were paralyzed before the torn veil, unable to explain how such a thick curtain could have been split from top to bottom. Yet, on the celestial plane, the events were only beginning. Michael and Uriel were traversing dimensions, carrying with them the chalice filled with the blood of the Messiah. The golden glow of the sacred liquid flickered within the vessel of light, radiating a power so intense that even the archangels felt its magnitude. They knew that this blood was not merely a symbol of redemption for humanity. It carried the very divine code of creation, an essence that no force could imitate or destroy. Every drop had a purpose, a destiny mapped out since the beginning of time. That was why their journey would not end there. The chalice needed to be taken to a sacred place, a land prepared since ancient times to receive it. With that mission in mind, the two archangels set their course for a destination few could imagine: Ethiopia. The journey of the archangels did not follow a linear path. They did not simply cross the skies like lightning. The blood of Christ could not be transported by a mere crossing. Ethiopian tradition recounts that, while Michael and Uriel traversed spiritual realms, invisible forces tried to stop them. Hordes of fallen angels, still resentful of their expulsion from heaven, attacked them in despair. They could not bear the idea that the blood of the Son of God would be used for such a grand purpose. Darkness rose, and the very air around the archangels grew as heavy as lead. But Michael, wielding his flaming sword, did not hesitate. With a single strike, he cleared a path through the shadows, his blade burning with divine justice. Uriel, clutching the chalice firmly, invoked the light of the Most High, and a devastating flash dispersed the enemies like ashes in the wind. The battle lasted what to mortals would have been only an instant, but on the celestial plane, it resonated like a shock through the ages. In the end, nothing could stop the destiny of that sacred blood. The path was clear. Ethiopia awaited, and the time of prophecy was about to be fulfilled. When Michael and Uriel crossed the barrier between worlds and arrived in the heavens over Ethiopia, nature itself seemed to acknowledge their presence. The wind ceased. The rivers reflected a golden glow, and the ancient mountains trembled slightly as if something very old were awakening. At that time, Ethiopia was already a land deeply connected to faith, with spiritual roots that reached back to Solomon and the Queen of Sheba. But few knew that, even before receiving Christian missionaries, that soil was destined to be sanctified. Uriel hovered over a sacred mountain known by Ethiopian elders as a place of communion between heaven and earth. He raised the chalice, and from within it, small drops of blood began to fall, touching the ground gently. Each drop that descended provoked an imperceptible yet powerful change. The earth absorbed that blood as if it recognized its importance, and from that moment on, that land would never be the same. Michael observed in silence, aware that this was one of the holiest moments ever witnessed by the spiritual realms. The blood of the Messiah now became part of the very foundation of Ethiopia. As the drops fell, an invisible energy coursed through the land, as if a divine seal were being imprinted upon the soil. In distant regions, monks and priests felt something different in the air, a calling that could not be ignored. That blood, mixed with the Ethiopian soil, not only sanctified the land, but also created an eternal bond between that nation and the sacrifice of Christ. Centuries later, when Christianity officially arrived in Ethiopia, the elders would affirm that their faith was not merely taught by missionaries. It was something that had always been there in the rocks, in the rivers, in the very air they breathed. The first Christian temples erected in the region emerged in places that, without any logical explanation, had already been considered sacred by previous generations. It was as if that land had already been prepared to receive the message of the gospel. Uriel and Michael knew that their mission was complete. The chalice, now empty, shone one last time before dissolving into pure light. The blood of the Messiah had been delivered. His sacrifice did not end on the cross. It spread, shaping the history of humanity in ways few could comprehend. Ethiopia, marked by this event invisible to human eyes, had become a spiritually unique territory. While The archangels returned to the celestial realm. A man, a simple shepherd tending his sheep on a distant hill, felt something he could never explain. He was accustomed to the silence of the night, to the rustling of the wind among the trees, and to the distant sound of wolves howling, but at that moment a profound silence descended upon the landscape. The air grew dense, charged with something that made his skin tingle. He fell to his knees without understanding why, his heart pounding erratically, as if in the presence of something immeasurable. For a brief moment he saw a flash in the sky, and although he could not discern its origin, he knew that something sacred had occurred. That night he returned to the village and recounted his experience to the elders, who listened in silence, exchanging glances that revealed more than their mouths would dare to say. They knew that that place was special, but they never fully understood why. Over the years, the effects of what had happened became more evident. Entire villages began to report strange phenomena, dreams in which luminous figures announced a great revelation, rivers whose waters seemed to shine under the moon, even on the darkest nights, and an inexplicable sense of peace that overtook those who set foot on that land. The priests of the time interpreted these signs as omens of something greater, but no one knew exactly what to expect. It was only centuries later, when Christianity officially arrived in Ethiopia, bringing with it the stories of the crucified Messiah, that the elders finally understood. They were not receiving a new faith. They were merely being reminded of something that had always been a part of them. The rock-hewn temples, like those of Lalibela, would later arise in locations that, for no apparent reason, had already been considered sacred long before the arrival of the evangelizers. But the truth, known only to those who preserved the oldest stories, was that this land had already been sanctified on the day of the crucifixion, when the blood of the Son of God touched its soil, sealing an eternal covenant between heaven and Ethiopia. Those who maintained the oral tradition knew that the event that sanctified Ethiopia was not a coincidence, but part of a divine plan mapped out even before the creation of the world. The ancient monks, responsible for preserving the mysteries of the faith, believed that the Messiah's blood had been shed there to prepare the nation for times of trial. And indeed, over the centuries, Ethiopia would face wars, invasions, and constant attempts to eradicate its faith. Yet nothing would shake the conviction of its people. Many attributed this unwavering resistance to the invisible blessing bestowed upon their land on the day of the crucifixion. Tales of warriors facing superior armies without fear of death were common, as were stories of priests who, even under threat, never renounced their faith. For them, the cross was not just a symbol. It was the very mark imprinted on the soil, a silent reminder that they had been chosen to bear a sacred heritage. And, in the darkest days, when all seemed lost, they said that, amid storms and battles, one could still hear a whisper in the wind, the echo of the blood that sealed the destiny of that land. As the centuries passed, the spiritual influence of this mystery continued to manifest in unexpected ways. Monks and elders reported visions of radiant figures appearing in moments of crisis, guiding those who sought protection or wisdom. Many of these apparitions were attributed to Archangel Uriel himself, whose presence had never abandoned the land he helped sanctify. On some nights, when the mountains were bathed in the silvery light of the moon, some swore they could see shadows of wings crossing the sky, as if angels still watched over that nation. The connection between Christ's sacrifice and Ethiopia became a secret preserved only by the wisest, passed down from generation to generation through chants and prayers. For the Ethiopians, their faith was not just a choice, it was a calling, a duty inherited from the moment the Redeemer's blood touched their soil. And even in the face of modernity and worldly changes, Those who know this story still believe that Ethiopia remains a chosen land, a piece of earth that, in some way, maintains an invisible and eternal link with heaven. Even today, there are places in Ethiopia where the atmosphere seems charged with something different, something that common eyes cannot see, but that the spirit feels. Pilgrims who visit ancient monasteries report strange sensations upon stepping into certain areas, as if they were being watched by an invisible and sacred presence. In some of these regions, the vegetation grows in peculiar ways, and the waters of certain streams possess inexplicable properties, considered miraculous by those who drink them. The monks, silent guardians of these mysteries, rarely speak of what they know, but in their eyes there is a deep understanding. They know the true story. They say that on certain days of the year the ground appears to emit a faint glow at sunrise, a phenomenon that scientists cannot explain. For the faithful, this is just another piece of evidence that the blessing of Christ's blood still resonates in the land, fulfilling a divine purpose that remains hidden from the outside world. No matter how many centuries pass, the covenant between heaven and Ethiopia will never be broken. There are even accounts of monks who, in their deepest moments of prayer, feel an unusual warmth in their hands, as if holding something invisible yet real. Some believe that this phenomenon is directly linked to the sacred blood that Uriel shed upon the land. They say that at certain moments of the night, when the silence is absolute, it is possible to hear a distant sound, resembling the drip of liquid on rock, an echo of Christ's blood, preserved by time. These stories may seem legendary to many, but for those who live them, there is no doubt. Ethiopia's faith is different because it was not only taught, it was imprinted on the soil, absorbed by the land, and guarded by the angels themselves. And while the world forgets, while Western Christianity fractures into disputes and interpretations, in Ethiopia the truth has been preserved as a sacred secret, passed on only to those deemed worthy of hearing it. The Messiah's blood did not disappear. It remains alive, echoing through the generations. In remote villages where Ethiopian Christianity has remained unchanged for centuries, the elders tell stories of nights when the heavens open and luminous figures descend upon the mountains. These accounts are not treated as legends, but as incontestable truths passed from father to son. According to them, on some occasions, shepherds and pilgrims who traverse the sacred trails vanish for a few hours, only to return with tearful eyes and skin, warm to the touch, as if they had seen something that their mouths cannot describe. Some return with strange words on their lips, phrases in forgotten languages that the oldest priests recognize as prayers from the first Christian communities. Others, marked by these experiences, abandon their ordinary lives and become monks, dedicating the rest of their days to prayer and silence. What they saw, no one knows for sure, but one thing is clear. The spiritual presence in those lands continues to manifest in ways that defy any rational explanation. For them, Ethiopia did not merely receive Christianity, it was sealed by the very blood of the Lamb. Among the most obscure traditions of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, there is an account known only to a few, a secret guarded by the oldest monks and never recorded in scriptures open to the public. It is said that the chalice Uriel used to collect Christ's blood did not disappear completely. Some believe that before its dissolution into light, it left behind a trace, a small fragment of its celestial essence hidden somewhere in the depths of a remote monastery. There are ancient texts, written in Ge'ez, the Ethiopian liturgical language, that suggest that this relic still exists, protected by a lineage of spiritual guardians chosen from childhood. Whoever attempts to find it never returns, whether out of abandonment, madness, or simply because the paths to this secret are not meant to be traversed by ordinary men. The monks, who know this story, never deny its truth, but they also never confirm it. They only smile and say that some truths are meant only for the eyes of those who have enough faith to see them. The search for this relic has, over the centuries, become an obsession for some and a curse for others. Kings and emperors, fascinated by the power of Christ's blood, sent secret expeditions to try to find the place where the trace of the chalice might be hidden. Some claim that medieval Christian warriors, upon hearing rumors about this relic, secretly traveled to Ethiopia, hoping to obtain an artifact that could grant unimaginable blessings. However, none of them returned with answers. Some disappeared in the mountains. Others were found wandering without memory, murmuring nonsensical phrases. The legend goes that sacred blood cannot be taken by ambition, for it was not shed to satisfy the vanity of men. Only those with a pure heart, guided not by the desire for power, but by absolute devotion, could come close to the secret the angels left behind. But even today, no one has ever been able to prove its existence. For the Ethiopian monks, this is just another reminder that some truths are not meant to be possessed, only respected. Despite the silence that surrounds this mystery, there are signs scattered throughout Ethiopia that suggest the presence of the sacred blood is still felt. Some ancient churches preserve manuscripts that mention the light within the stone, an indication that something beyond human understanding rests beneath the rock-hewn temples. Some priests whisper about a hidden altar, accessible only to those who dedicate their lives to prayer and divine service. According to them, on certain nights of the year, a warm breeze passes through the temple, even when the weather should be cold. A sweet, unknown scent fills the air, and the monks claim to feel a presence that makes them weep without explanation. For the believers, this is the definitive proof that the connection between heaven and earth has never been broken. Christ's blood was not just a symbol, it was a spiritual seal that marked Ethiopia irreversibly. And even if many doubt these stories, those who witness them are never the same again. Over the centuries, the story of Christ's blood in Ethiopia became part of the country's spiritual fabric, interwoven with every prayer whispered in the ancient monasteries and every chant sung in the rock-hewn churches. The oldest monks say that those who set foot in these temples without a pure heart feel an invisible weight upon their shoulders, as if they were being watched by forces that cannot be comprehended. There are accounts of pilgrims who, upon kneeling in these sacred places, have had visions of golden lights pulsing beneath the ground, as if the earth were alive. Some speak of dreams, where angels reveal hidden passages beneath the mountains, paths that at dawn simply vanish. Those who guard this secret know that Christ's blood continues to manifest its presence, guiding the faith of the Ethiopian people like a flame that never goes out. For them, the true church is not only in the temples or in the sacred texts, but in the land that was sanctified with the blood of the Lamb. However, even among the most devout, there is a silent fear that one day this secret may be violated. In times of conflict and persecution, rumors arise that external forces are attempting to unravel the mystery and seize for themselves the hidden blessing of Ethiopia. Some say that if that sacred blood were to be desecrated, the balance of the spiritual world could be shaken in unpredictable ways. Therefore, the monks continue their vigil, protecting not only the traditions, but the very essence of what they believe has been entrusted to them. There are stories of mysterious warriors who, in moments of crisis, appear to defend the sacred places, and some say that these guardians are not merely human. Legends speak of winged shadows that cross the sky on moonless nights, protecting the land from invaders who never understand the true magnitude of what they seek to attain. What is hidden in Ethiopia is not just a secret, it is living proof that Christ's sacrifice transcended the limits of the cross and became part of the very structure of reality. The few who dare question these accounts soon encounter inexplicable events. There are records of foreigners who, when attempting to explore sacred sites without permission, suddenly fell ill or became lost in the mountains without a trace. Those who returned, disoriented and unable to articulate what they had seen, spoke of voices in the wind and luminous shadows moving among the trees. For the monks who guard these places, there is no doubt, celestial protection still watches over the sanctified land, and while many seek relics and artifacts to prove their faith, the wisest know that the true presence of Christ cannot be contained in an object. His blood is not merely a substance lost in history. It pulses in the very essence of that nation, connecting each generation to the promise of redemption. The elders say that as long as there is faith in the hearts of the Ethiopians, the blessing will remain intact, sealed by a covenant that no earthly power can break. And so Ethiopia continues to be one of the greatest mysteries of Christianity, a nation whose spiritual heritage was written not only on scrolls, but on the very soil. Whether the story of that sacred blood will one day be revealed to the whole world, no one can say. There are those who believe that the truth will only come at the end of times, when all mysteries are unraveled and humanity understands the grandeur of what happened at Golgotha. Until then, Ethiopia remains as a silent testimony to something far greater than the history recorded in books. The monks continue their vigils, the faithful persist in their prayers, and those who seek the truth find more questions than answers. But for those who feel, who see, and who know, there is no doubt, the land was marked by something divine. And as long as the mountains stand tall and the rivers keep flowing, Christ's blood will remain there, invisible to ordinary eyes, yet present for those who have enough faith to perceive it. In the end, perhaps that is the greatest lesson of all. It is not about finding an artifact, but understanding that some secrets can only be revealed to those who truly believe. And so, the mystery remains, floating between the sacred and the hidden, between unyielding faith and the unknown. For those who guard this story, there is no need for concrete proof. The connection between the crucifixion and Ethiopia is engraved in every stone, in every prayer, in every shadow that dances under the light of dawn. The oldest monks say that on certain nights, when the darkness seems denser, it is possible to hear a distant echo, a soft vibration that seems to come from the very ground. Some believe it is the sacred blood still whispering its presence, reminding those who listen that its mission is not yet complete. But whatever the truth may be, one thing is certain. The story of Christ's blood in Ethiopia is not just a tale lost in time. It is a living secret, guarded for centuries, protected by angels and passed down only to those who have eyes to see and ears to hear.